The Stone Zone with legendary Republican strategist and political icon and pundit Roger Stone. Stone has served as a senior campaign aide to 3 Republican presidents. He is a New York Times best-selling author and a longtime friend and advisor of President Donald Trump. As an outspoken libertarian, Stone has appeared on thousands of broadcasts, spoken at countless venues, and lectured before the prestigious Oxford Political Union and the Cambridge Union Society. Due to his 4+ decades in the political and cultural arena, Stone has become a pop culture icon. And now, here's your host, Roger Stone.
Welcome, I'm Roger Stone, and yes, you are back in the Stone Zone, the place for politics. To help me break down the political news of the day, I want to bring in my co-host for today's show. That would be Mark Vargas, the editor-in-chief of the Illinois Review.
Roger, always an honor to join you on the Stone Zone.
I really appreciate your jumping in here, Mark. Let's get right into the political news. And then in our second half of the show, we're going to talk about the new documentary, The Climate According to Al Gore, by the documentary filmmaker Joel Gilbert. Mark, I thought I'd seen it all. I mean, Eric Adams, the Democrat mayor of New York City, ran for mayor as a supporter of New York being a sanctuary city. He said on numerous occasions, both before and after his election as mayor, that illegals were welcome in New York City. He never once criticized Joe Biden's open borders policy. He did complain about the fact that the Biden administration would not give him millions of dollars of our tax money to pay for the problem in New York that they had created. He located migrant shelters in some of the most stable working class neighborhoods in New York. In one occasion, he actually put a migrant facility next to a Catholic girls' school in Staten Island, New York. But now I think I've seen it all. In his simping for a pardon, Mayor Adams has tried to reposition himself as a victim of the criminalization of the justice system. That despite the fact that he's charged with taking $100,000 from Turkey, that's illegal, giving it to straw donors, that's also illegal, and then funneling that money through the New York City 10-to-1 campaign finance matching program. Now, as that clip just indicated, suddenly he thinks that the parents who went to school board meetings to complain about their children's curriculum, who were harassed by the FBI, were targets of political weaponization. And he's questioning the conviction of the January 6th detainees. I've seen it all. Now, here's the latest, and this is an unconfirmed rumor, but it is rumored that Mayor Eric Adams is going to stop at Mar-a-Lago to see President Trump on his way to a speech in Puerto Rico. Again, I stress that that is unconfirmed. Mark, have you ever seen anything quite so obvious?
I've never seen anything like this before in my life, Roger, and you've been around politics for a lot longer than I have. But for starters, it's laughable to talk about that he's a victim of a weaponized justice system. I mean, Roger, look what you and your wonderful wife, Nydia, have had to deal with over the last several years. Look at what former Illinois Governor Rod Blagojevich and his family has had to deal with over his conviction and imprisonment for 8 years. Think about what President Trump and his family have had to go through over the last 8 years. President Trump has certainly realigned politics in America, and this is yet a perfect example. How dare Mayor Adams invoke the parents who stood up for their children? I know families who have been placed on the terror watch list, not because they're enemies of the state, but because they stood up for their children and other families' children in school board meetings. The conditions for many of these J6 prisoners is absolutely horrendous, Soviet-style like prison conditions. But again, Mayor Adams is very publicly proving why the general public rejected the Democratic policies and the Kamala Harris and Biden, I call him Biden, the Biden regime because they're sick and tired of politicians all talk, lies, deception. And this is yet more evidence why President Trump won such a large, significant, and historic mandate on November 5th.
You know, Mark, I actually don't think that President Trump is fully aware of the not only the current charges against Mayor Eric Adams, but also the fact that the mayor is fighting two different sexual assault lawsuits, which the city of New York is bearing the expense of his defense, which I think, by the way, is illegal. Now, this is kind of ironic because a cabal of New York Democrats cleverly changed the law to set a period in which claims could be made again for sexual assault in instances or alleged events that happened outside the statute of limitations. This was designed to snare one person and one person only. That would be Donald Trump. And I speak, of course, about the highly suspicious and I think specious claims of E. Jean Carroll. This is the woman who accused Donald Trump of assaulting her in the dressing room at the very exclusive department store Bergdorf Goodman. Yet the jury was not allowed to be told that, well, her entire story seemed to be based on a Law and Order episode, that the dress that she claimed she was wearing at the time she was assaulted was not even manufactured yet by the designer, and the fact that she had accused multiple men in the past of sexually assaulting her. Now, add to that she told Anderson Cooper on CNN that she found the entire concept of rape sexy. Boy, they cut to a commercial break quickly there. It's ironic that Adams, along with New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, got snared in this very specific change in the law, which was set up to try to entrap Donald Trump in something that, frankly, I think he is completely innocent.
President Trump is innocent. And, one example, there's a lot of them, but one example is this, or two I'll give you, the Robert Mueller, Russia, Russia, Russia. That's all we heard. Impeachments, impeachment, impeachment. There was nothing there. Thinking about what happened with all of the cases with Jack Smith, the indictments, the charges, and just as fast as he spun up that investigation, he very quickly wrapped it up and, like the light switch, flipped it off and said, "This is it, game over. I'm going to resign my position." Again, this has been a strategy by the Democrats and the deep state for a long time. And that is what you do, is you try and take out people who serve the interests of the people that they serve rather than the people that they serve with and alongside. And so, again, I'm looking forward for even more vindication for President Trump and vindication for those around him, like you as well, Roger.
So, Mark, I think you may be familiar with what Nancy Pelosi refers to as the wrap-up smear. Unfortunately, I think Tulsi Gabbard, the former Democrat Congresswoman who served 4 terms in the House, member of the Foreign Affairs Committee and the Armed Services Committee, a woman who is today a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army Reserve, having served her country in combat in both Iraq and Kuwait, is about to be subjected to the wrap-up smear. Let's take a look at Nancy Pelosi laying out exactly how this works.
If you want to talk politics, call it the wrap-up smear. You smear somebody with falsehoods and all the rest, and then you merchandise it. And then you write it, and they'll say, "See, it's reported in the press that this, and this." So they have that validation that the press reported the smear, and then it's called the wrap-up smear. Now I'm going to merchandise the press's report on the smear that we made. And it's a tactic, and it's self-evident.
That looked like a confession to me, Mark, but I don't know if you saw this, but Adam Kinzinger, that lowlife, is questioning the patriotism of Tulsi Gabbard. He put up this graphic on X. Now, this is, I think, character assassination of the worst type. Just because Tulsi Gabbard does not want to ship billions more to Ukraine, is no reason to question her loyalty or patriotism, or I should say loyalty to the country. Mark, your thoughts?
The U.S. intelligence community is in total disarray. They're not trusted by the American people. They're not trusted by many members of Congress, and they're not trusted by our allies. It's a huge problem. That same intel community has been used and weaponized to target their political enemies. What's interesting is that the Democratic Party loved Tulsi Gabbard up until the point where she completely annihilated Kamala Harris during that infamous debate in 2019 during the Democratic presidential primary campaign and her subsequent support of President Trump. But these are all targeted smear campaigns. Roger, what's also remarkable that I'd never see the day is that when that serving in the military honorably for all of the time that she has serving in combat, that having the security clearances that she held and those positions serving our country, that means she's clearly not qualified to serve in this capacity as head of the Intel Committee, as the Director of National Intelligence. It's just remarkable that they would dismiss her service to our country, her military service, and that is why over 200 veterans, and I think that number is going to increase, have signed a letter expressing their support for Tulsi Gabbard. What a slap in the face to our veterans, and what a slap in the face to the people currently serving in our armed forces.
You make reference to this petition of veterans supporting Tulsi Gabbard. I think this is evocative of a very important strategy. We spoke about this on yesterday's show. I think it is vitally important right now that anyone watching or listening to the Stone Zone, pardon me, who are concerned about the confirmation of the president's nominees, whether it is Kash Patel at the FBI or Tulsi Gabbard at DNI or Pete Hegseth at Secretary of Defense or any of his nominees, ultimately Robert F. Kennedy Jr., I really think the answer is grassroots action. Again, I urge people to go online, find the phone number for the office of your U.S. Senator. I think you should go to the state office rather than their office in the D.C. Capitol. You'll also find their email address. Now, what I strongly urge you to do is to contact your senators and tell them politely and in a civil tone that you urge them to support the president's nominees. And if they do not do so, that you will take this into consideration when they are either challenged in a future primary or standing for re-election. I believe this kind of grassroots action has already had some effect. Case in point, Senator Mark Wayne Mullen of Oklahoma. He was elected to fill the seat of James Inhofe, who resigned because of poor health. Mark Wayne Mullen is an early Trump supporter, but with establishment Republican ties. He and the odious James Lankford came out jointly and said they weren't sure they would vote for all of the president's nominees. Not sure how they could know that yet, since hearings haven't been held and they haven't met with any of them, although I think those meetings began yesterday and today. But then Mark Wayne said online that he was not certain that he would vote for the appointment of Kash Patel as the head of the FBI, which I think may be one of, if not the most important appointment in this administration. Second, perhaps only to the great appointment of Pam Bondi as the Attorney General. I know because of grassroots action on behalf of patriots on the ground in Oklahoma that both U.S. senators were buried in messages from their constituents urging them to support the president's nominees. Bingo, Mark Wayne Mullen announces that he's going to vote for Kash Patel. This is an example of citizen action and why this is so very important. Let's switch, if we could, to the question of Pete Hegseth. The president has doubled down. There's no indication he's going to withdraw this nomination. I saw a breakthrough here in which Joni Ernst, who had thought to be an opponent, announced that she was going to vote for that nomination. Mark, your thoughts?
To kind of dovetail off of what you just said, Roger, when we stand up, they stand down. Again, this is the power of the grassroots MAGA movement all over our country. Joni Ernst felt the heat from MAGA, and she needed a gentle reminder that President Trump was given a mandate on November 5th, and that by the historic number of people that voted for him, that they wanted him to make these decisions. They wanted him to lead our country, and they wanted his choices for these very important positions to be confirmed and to serve our country. So that's very welcome news. But more importantly, it sends a message to those other deep state senators like Murkowski and others, Mitch McConnell, that there will be consequences if you oppose the will of the American people. So this is an incredible historic lesson playing out here on live television.
It is really quite extraordinary. It's democracy in action. Before we get to our guests who will be joining us shortly, I do want to remind folks about Al Gore. Remember him? He's the guy who said he invented the internet. Now, Al Gore has been talking about the cataclysmic nature of climate change and, frankly, has been essentially predicting the end of the world now for several decades. Here's Al Gore talking about what we call the climate change grift.
Got local environmental problems, regional problems like acid rain. Now we've got a whole new category of global or strategic problems, which include the hole in the ozone layer, which now could appear above the United States, global climate change, the destruction of the rainforest at a rate that means they'll be totally gone in another few decades unless we stop, the pollution of the oceans and the atmosphere, and the like. These represent brand new challenges that call for a new kind of response.
Rush, I've listened to you many afternoons, as you know, and you tend to, I don't want to say you dismiss all of these issues, but at least you dismiss them as having been proven beyond a shadow of a doubt.
Well, absolutely. I don't think that there's anything conclusive about what Senator Gore said, with all due respect. I think, for example, there is no ozone hole over the United States. If we want to get into detailed discussion of ozone depletion, we can, but I think, Ted, that there is not a crisis. See, this is the problem I have. I don't think the Earth is fragile. I don't think the ecology is fragilely balanced. And I think that the doomsday industry that is typified by members of the Hollywood acting community who say we've only got 10 years left to save our planet, we've got to act now. There's no way, if what these people say is true, that we can solve these problems in 10 years anyway. It's budget time in Washington. NASA's being cut. And I think that this fright and doom scenario is designed to frighten people. Everything in this country today seems to be a crisis. We can't do anything without it being having to face it as a crisis. We don't have any time to think about it. There are as many scientists, maybe even more, on the opposite side of all of these doomsday predictions. And I think that they need to be listened to. Yeah, oh, yes, there are.
That's not true. If I can jump in there, Ted, where the ozone hole is concerned, for example, the linkage between these chemicals, chlorofluorocarbons, and the ozone hole is established. There may be 1/100th of 1% of the scientific community that disputes it.
Oh, no. It's far more than that. Ted, that the environmental movement, as fueled by the militants who lead it, I think is the new home of socialism.
The ozone hole is threatening to open up above North America, above Kennebunkport, and still we're not reacting.
That was over 30 years ago. How'd that hole in the ozone layer work out? Here's another one, because we need some levity this morning on the Stone Zone. Here's Al Gore claiming that we're going to be boiling the oceans.
We're going to bring these emissions down. And just to put the science in a slightly different context, people are familiar with that thin blue line that the astronauts bring back in their pictures from space. That's the part of the atmosphere that has oxygen, the troposphere, and it's only 5 to 7 kilometers thick. I know. That's what we're using as an open sewer. If you could drive a car straight up in the air at interstate highway speeds, you'd get to the top of that blue line in 5 minutes. And all the greenhouse gas pollution would be below you. We're still putting 162 million tons into it every single day. And the accumulated amount is now trapping as much extra heat as would be released by 600,000 Hiroshima-class atomic bombs exploding every single day on the Earth. That's what's boiling the oceans, creating these atmospheric rivers and the rain bombs and sucking the moisture out of the land and creating the droughts and melting the ice and raising the sea level and causing these waves of climate refugees predicted to reach 1 billion in this century. Look at the xenophobia and political authoritarian trends that have come from just a few million refugees. What about 1 billion? We would lose our capacity for self-governance on this world. We have to act. So in answer to your question, I would say we have to have a sense of urgency much greater than we have yet had, and we need to make some changes.
Mark, I wonder if former Vice President Al Gore flew to that World Economic Forum event in his private jet and what the carbon footprint for that might be. This guy is unbelievable. In 1982, Al Gore actually predicted that 25% of Florida would soon be underwater. I looked out the window this morning, Mark. It seems dry to me. Let's take a look.
Concern about rising temperatures on planet Earth heated up a hearing here in Washington today. For years, scientists have theorized about the dangers of the so-called greenhouse effect, the warming of the Earth's atmosphere due to the burning of coal and oil. And in recent months, as David Culhane reports, research has uncovered facts to support that theory.
Many scientists claim that the temperature of the Earth's atmosphere has been rising over the past 100 years, that the great sheets of pack ice in Antarctica are melting at a much more rapid rate than previously. And finally, that the sea level has been rising with increasing swiftness over the past 40 years. If these scientists are correct, about 25% of Florida would be flooded, along with low-lying areas all over the world. Climate changes could produce widespread disruption of agriculture. The American farm belt might be too dry, and the wheat and corn crops would have to move to Canada. Scientists blame the odorless, colorless carbon dioxide gas for these potentially dangerous changes around the planet. It is the greenhouse effect. The gas allows sunlight to filter down and warm the Earth. But like the glass of a greenhouse, the carbon dioxide tends to trap heat so that it cannot rise into space. The scientists maintain that the coal, oil, and gas we've been burning for 100 years have produced more and more carbon dioxide and helped overheat the Earth. Now, some political leaders endorse the demands for more CO2 monitoring stations, like this one in Hawaii. And they share the anger of the scientists at Reagan administration budget cuts at a time when they feel closer to getting definitive answers.
We are not doing the kind of research that we should be doing to determine whether or not these scientists who are so alarmed are correct in their assessment.
And what they find out will affect the lives and fortunes of millions of people, the very survival of cities like this one. David Culhane, CBS News, New York.
I mean, that was 1982. This entire tale of disaster just doesn't seem to pan out. Frankly, I think one of the best things Donald Trump did early in his first term was to withdraw us from the Paris climate accords. Under those accords, we would pay $325 million a year, while the Chinese, who I think without dispute are the worst polluters on the globe, would pay absolutely nothing. All right, we're going to have to leave it there. I want to thank my friend Mark Vargas with the Illinois Review, where he is the editor-in-chief, turning out fabulous content. Mark, tell people where folks can follow you.
Follow me on X, Mark A. Vargas. You can follow Illinois Review on X and find us on Facebook, but IllinoisReview.com is where you can sign up and get all of our alerts.
Terrific. Thank you. Mark will be back with us tomorrow right here in the Stone Zone. Mark, many, many thanks. Folks, if you're looking for a Christmas present and there's someone in your family who loves history and politics and maybe even mystery, let me recommend my New York Times best-selling book, The Man Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ. Now, I took this book to 7 different publishers before I found one willing to publish its bombshell conclusions. This heavily documented, thoroughly footnoted book makes the case that Lyndon Baines Johnson is the man who had the motive, means, and opportunity to murder President John F. Kennedy. And I lay out a plot that includes the Central Intelligence Agency, the Big Texas Oil, organized crime, the Secret Service, and in the latter stages, the FBI. I use eyewitness evidence, fingerprint evidence, and deep Texas politics to make the case that Lyndon Johnson is the leader of the plot to murder his predecessor. You can order your copy and get it in time for Christmas. And yes, I will personalize it for you by going to themanwhokilledkennedy.com. themanwhokilledkennedy.com. Now, you can buy the book on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or elsewhere if you want to give your money to multinational corporations that hate your guts. If you do choose to buy it on one of those other sites, please be sure to get the paperback version because it has 3 extra chapters. Pardon me. Okay, so we are now going to go to our guests who will join us here. First of all, documentary filmmaker Joel Gilbert, whose long line of accomplished documentaries, but whose new one, The Climate According to Al Gore, is our topic for today. And also joining us is Australian Member of Parliament, the Honourable John Ruddick of Australia. Gentlemen.
Okay, great to be here, Roger. I'm joining you from my iPhone. I hope you can see and hear me okay, because they've cut off the electricity here in California, and I'm talking to you from my iPhone.
I see. The purpose for this brownout, have they told you?
They have electricity shortages, so they simply cut off certain areas to make sure they don't run out of electricity. And so I'm joining you with my iPhone today.
All right. Well, at least you are able to make us. And also, John Ruddick, welcome also into the Stone Zone.
Good morning from Sydney, Australia, Roger. Very nice to see you, and nice to see my friend Joel again as well.
Great. All right, Joel, you have an exciting new documentary, The Climate According to Al Gore. Talk to us about this. I know you worked in Washington, D.C. as an intern in Al Gore's office as a very, very young man. So give us the backstory on this documentary.
Well, I did work for Al Gore, and the reason I got interested in this subject was because of John Ruddick right there in Australia had sent me a speech he gave in the Australian Parliament criticizing the climate policies of the Australian government. And I told him, you know, I used to work for Al Gore, and he suggested I look into it. And he alerted me to the fact that Gore admitted he was no scientist. And he claimed that he got his scientific research from his Harvard professor named Roger Revelle. But no one had ever looked into Roger Revelle and to see if he really did even agree with Al Gore. So I went to the University of San Diego where his papers are stored. And the first thing I discover is that Al Gore took a course on human populations from Roger Revelle, not anything to do with the climate whatsoever. Gore gets a C in that class. And I also read that according to Roger Revelle's articles and interviews over 40 years, he did not agree with Al Gore at all about climate change, global warming, greenhouse gases, nothing at all. And Gore actually got caught when he was debating Dan Quayle in 1992 at the vice presidential debate. He was confronted. They said, hey, your mentor doesn't even agree with you. Al Gore lies and says, no, he was misquoted. But he wasn't misquoted. So what Gore did is in 1992, he came up with this book, Earth in the Balance. It was this climate apocalypse manifesto where he said there's too much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. We're all doomed the more we put into the atmosphere. But I realized Gore did not get his science from Roger Revelle. I said, where did he get it from? And I knew that this book was all about a spiritual crisis, a crisis of faith, a crisis of man's relationship with the earth. And that was very similar to the type of rhetoric coming out of Vanderbilt Divinity School where Al Gore had attended to get out of the Vietnam War. And I looked at those professors he studied with were radical environmental professors, and they required that Gore read this book called Our Plundered Planet. So I read Our Plundered Planet from 1948. It's this wacky book. And I read Earth in the Balance. And it turns out that Gore copied this book to come up with his climate apocalypse manifesto. So this book simply said that Earth is perfect and human beings are ruining it by using fossil fuels, by knocking down trees, we're all going to die. So Gore in 1992 couldn't say, I got my science from my wacky environmental professors at divinity school. I got it from this wacky book from the 40s. So Gore lies and says he got this science from Harvard and no one really looked into it. So that's what I think my movie, The World According to AI Al Gore, I think I blow the lid off this whole climate hoax because I showed that Al Gore just made it up. The idea that there's too much carbon dioxide, he completely made it up. And when he came out with An Inconvenient Truth in 2006, the whole movement exploded into this whole international trillion-dollar business where all these scientists get paid to agree with this nonsense. And I show you in the movie that, in fact, carbon dioxide is not a bad gas. We produce it every time we exhale. And it's plant food. The more we put in the atmosphere, the taller the trees grow, the more crops we get. So carbon dioxide is not bad. We need more of it, but we have a worldwide climate religion that now has all these climate warriors. And I expose in the film that the entire climate movement is just the latest same old scam to force people into central planning and wealth redistribution, things that no one would ever vote for. So that's an overview of it. And you can see the trailer and get the movie at climatealgore.com.
Actually, we're going to show folks the trailer right now.
We have a global emergency, an existential threat to human civilization on this planet as we know it.
Al Gore is the godfather of the worldwide climate change movement.
He even won the Nobel Prize.
When I was a student, I worked for Al Gore. But wait a minute, Al Gore is no scientist.
Well, this man's name was Roger Revelle, and that's the whole reason why I got interested in this.
Did Revelle even agree with the climate theories that Al Gore sold to the world?
I decided to dig deep and do the research. Dear Senator Gore, I would love to interview you about Revelle and learn more about your journey in climate science as well as your personal history. Gore didn't respond, so I decided to use AI technology to speak to Al Gore.
Well, hello again, Joel.
Senator Gore.
I'm thrilled to have a visit with one of my old student interns.
Are you ready for some questions?
Fire away.
What was it like to be a politician's son?
My dad cast a giant shadow over my life. I revered him and I feared him.
Why did you only get a C+ in Revelle's class at Harvard?
I invoke Roger Revelle's name.
Later on, I may have exaggerated my relationship with Roger Revelle.
How much did your pot smoking influence your climate alarmism?
I did smoke a lot of marijuana.
When I compare our plundered planet to Earth in the Balance, it looks to me like you just rewrote this book.
Human beings must heal the relationship.
The key to human life is the relationship
Between our civilization.
Between people.
And the ecological system.
And the resources.
Of the Earth.
Of the Earth.
Whew. Well, okay, you got me. I never expected anyone to put that all together.
Let's start with, what really is CO2?
This is a lot tougher discussion than I'd imagined. Carbon dioxide is not a poison or a bad gas. Carbon dioxide is our friend. All my predictions of rising sea levels flooding coastal cities were a bust.
What do politicians really want?
Central planning and wealth redistribution.
Put climate change at the center of our domestic, national security, and foreign policy.
It's really all an assault on freedom and prosperity.
You have stolen my dreams, my childhood.
The sky is not falling. It's all a hoax that has turned into one big scam.
All right, a question for John Ruddick. John, how are the government's climate policies, what are they like in Australia, and why are you leading the charge against them?
Well, look, I follow American politics closely. I know that climate change, global warming is a big deal in American politics. You had the Inflation Reduction Act, which was most of it was government spending on the silly climate projects. But in Australia, the reason I invited Joel to come out here and do a pre-tour and to do a launch of it in Australia first as a world premiere is because Australia is completely obsessed with this issue. So the equivalent, we've got, the equivalent of the Republican Party is called the Liberal Party in this country. It's generally a right of centre party, completely sold out on all this garbage. Now, the reason why people like Al Gore and others are targeting Australia is that we are one of the biggest fossil fuel exporters, and we've got a very gullible public. Now, Roger, I should tell you, I became obsessed with Al Gore, I suppose you could say. You've heard of Trump derangement syndrome. I've had Gore derangement syndrome for 24 years since the Florida recount. And I was very impressed with his political skills. He was dealt a difficult hand. And I just thought, look, this guy is like unstoppable. I mean, he's really on a mission. And I went into this long study. I read all the books I could about Al Gore, and I had a Google alert, and I was following him very, very closely. And then, he comes along with The Inconvenient Truth, and I really believe, Roger, he is the most influential human being this century so far. He's tricked governments all around the world and the media. Now, what Joel has done is, so when Joel and I first started talking about this project, he said to me, because I'd showed him some articles I'd written in the Spectator Australia, he said, "Oh, John, you must be the world's authority on Al Gore." But I have to say, Roger, that Joel is the world's #1 Gore researcher. He has uncovered some key facts here, which he outlined a few minutes ago, which no other researcher had worked out. It's absolutely damning. It's a brilliant film. The world needs to see this film because we are suffering a mass delusion. This is like the new religion for irreligious people. And it's the story of the big lie. A lot of people think, oh, well, they might be exaggerating it, but there must be some truth to it. No, there's not. As Joel said, carbon dioxide is our friend, not our enemy.
John, I want to point out that you actually rose in the Australian government and announced your support for President Donald Trump. So you clearly do follow American politics very closely. And as you know, the president has not only just won, he's won what I think is a transformative victory. In other words, I think here in America, we're undergoing a complete political realignment. The real division here in America is not between Republicans and Democrats. It's between people of common sense, people who support peace, people who support free speech, people who would like to be certain that we're not being poisoned by the food we eat or the drugs that in some cases we're required to take, and those who would have us rush headlong into world war. Those are the people who I think responsible for this lightning uprising in Syria, which adds greater instability to a region that was already extraordinarily unstable. People who openly admit, Hillary Clinton, Kamala Harris, that speech they don't agree with should be banned, and people should be prosecuted for saying things that they don't agree with, enemies of free speech, and of course, carte blanche for the pharmaceutical industry. Just in recent days, Donald Trump has been, I think, totally reasonably saying, look, we need to examine these issues. Let's get to the bottom. Some people say that vaccinations have a tie to autism. Others say that that is not so. Different scientists and different doctors disagree. Where is the harm in examining the question and getting to the truth? You can imagine how popular that is with the executives at Pfizer. Let's get back to climate change. Joel, how do you think this entire climate movement has affected the American economy so far?
Well, it's affected it even more so in places like Europe and Australia, where they have real hysteria. They have real climate panic. Here, it's still growing. They want to, of course, shut down coal mines. They want to limit farming, use of fertilizers. So it can have a devastating effect on the economy. I think Australia and Europe actually have negative growth, and it's all tied to these carbon reduction policies. In our country, of course, they want us to send billions to third world countries due to these climate conferences that they have. When they have a climate conference, the only way they get an agreement is to let China, India, and all of Africa off the hook. You guys don't have to do anything, but the Western countries will send you hundreds of billions of dollars. So those third world countries are more than happy to agree to sign up for it. And our treasury is being looted essentially by this idea that Al Gore put forward in 1992 when he lied and said there's too much carbon dioxide. He made up where he got it from. And I think this is the first film, The Climate According to AI Al Gore, that has a chance to really make an impact, because there have been climate hoax movies around before, but they tend to be kind of a lecture and a lot of talking heads. This is very entertaining because we have an AI version of Al Gore, and I talked to him about his whole life history and where he really got his climate science from. So the devastating effects will come to this country if Donald Trump doesn't follow through on his promise to turn around these climate panic policies of the previous administration.
John, I know that this film was premiered in Australia. What was reaction to the film?
Well, we had about 5 screenings around the country, including in our federal parliament, in the theatre out there. Look, everybody that watched it wanted to know how they could get it and share it with their friends, because they think it's a very powerful message. So, look, there is still I saw a poll a few years ago which said that of all the countries in the world, the United States has the highest percentage of climate skeptics. I think it was about 40%. Australia was second. We were about, this was a few years ago, 1 in 3 people are prepared to tell a pollster that they are skeptical of the global warming orthodoxy. So I think that is encouraging. And my party, which is the Libertarian Party, is a growing force in this country. And we believe in the separation of state, the separation of the state and the energy market. Our electricity prices are going through the roof. Joel just said he had a blackout in California. We had a blackout in Australia's finest city, where I'm sitting right now, in Sydney, okay, which is one of the world's great cities, a very advanced city, but we had a blackout. And why is that? Australia is sitting on thousands of years of coal, beautiful coal, that we sell to China and in India. It's our biggest export earner. But we are, in the name of this crazy religion, we are blowing it all up. And so, look, I think that I think Joel's film's going to be officially released in the next few days, and I'm hoping that it's going to be take off in Australia, because we need it here more than any other country.
I'm very interested in your discussion of the Libertarian Party of Australia. How many seats do you have in the parliament, and how do you see the future of the party?
Well, we are. I'm in the New South Wales Parliament, so that's the biggest state in Australia. So, and then we have somebody in Victoria, which is in our second biggest state. But we are a growing force in Australia. We do have a different electoral system, where we have proportional representation for the equivalent of the Senate. So with that power, we are confident that we're getting defections, and we are growing in force. The media is starting to pay more attention to us, and because our Liberal Party, which is the equivalent of your Republican Party, I know our terms are upside down in the Down Underland, but imagine if you had the leader of a right of centre party that's basically Mitt Romney, okay, but weak on everything, sells out on everything, tries to appease the left. That's what we've got in our major party on the right, and we're very much hoping that we can sort of challenge them in the coming years.
A question for Joel Gilbert, a little off topic. You made a documentary prior to the election entitled "Arrested by Kamala: A Black Mother's Story." This was the story of a woman named Sharae Peoples, a single mother who was prosecuted by District Attorney Kamala Harris because her daughter was missing from school. Her daughter was truant. However, as we know through your documentary, her daughter suffered a severe case of sickle cell anemia, had actually been hit by a stroke when she was just 12 years old, and was hospitalized during the majority of the period in which she should have been in school. You also documented in your film that the school authorities were fully aware of her situation, that they had seen all the medical documentation about her inability to come to class, and you put this up online. Uh, I believe that this important documentary played a key role in President Trump's gains among African American voters. I was just astounded by the number of Black people who showed it to me, who talked to me about it, who noticed it. It was an incredible accomplishment. Joel, how many people or how many downloads, I guess is the proper way to ask the question, do you think the documentary, particularly the 3-minute version, got?
Yeah, it was an important documentary. I agree that it had a huge impact. Donald Trump tweeted it and posted it on Truth Social 3 times. Elon Musk tweeted a version that RFK Jr.'s people put out. So it got over 60 million views. And I didn't talk to any Black people who weren't aware of it. So I think it had a big impact. And I think I did it because Kamala said she would put her record up against Donald Trump's any day when she announced for president. And I said, wait a minute, no one really looked at what she did in California. And she was a terrible attorney general. She abused and exploited, especially minority women, with this crazy idea to arrest parents if their kids miss school. And Sheree Peoples, her daughter Shayla, was in the hospital with sickle cell anemia, was arrested and tried, and lost her home, got evicted because of it. And the California Supreme Court had to rule it unconstitutional, which they did a few years later. So it just showed how callous Kamala Harris was toward Black people, especially when she was seeking, and the Democrat Party was seeking, to make her the poster child as a Black woman. But she had no understanding of the Black community and no common experiences with the Black community, having grown up in Canada with an Indian mother, and was completely unaware of the plight of Black people. And I think the Black voters understood that, and that's why they voted for Donald Trump.
I think that is an excellent analysis. Let me jump to another topic. People know you largely, of course, as a documentary filmmaker. Those who don't know you as a documentary filmmaker know you as a musician and an entertainer. But you also have an expertise in Middle Eastern affairs. You are trained in these. First of all, tell us your background in that area, if you would, and then I'd like to hear your views on what has just transpired in Syria and the implications of it.
Yeah, I lived in the Middle East for a year. I have a degree from the University of London, School of Oriental and African Studies. I actually studied with some of the great minds and professors of the 20th century in Middle Eastern studies. And I've produced 2 films and written many articles about the Middle East. And I think I've tried to communicate to the people in America and the Western world that the premise of understanding of the Islamic world is deficient, that they Islamists have different goals and values than Westerners, and understanding those goals and values is key to proper policy. Now, what happened in, the context of what happened in Israel, of course, goes back many years, but the Islamist movement has been around for 100 years, since the early 1900s. And it's based on the idea in Islam that Islam was successful in its first 600, 700, 800 years because of religion, because religion was the government of Islam. And that Islam only went into decline the last 300 years as their religious leaders were replaced with secular and Western government systems. So the Islamist movement seeks to return to traditional values and return to Islam dominating government throughout the Islamic world. The problem the Israelis had in the 1980s and 90s is they made a deal with the PLO, which was a secular Arab movement. And this was a movement that was rejected by the vast majority of Muslims. So the Israelis made a deal with the PLO to give them land in Gaza and the West Bank to create a Palestinian state, or the vestiges of one, even though they were not accepted by their own people. That's why the PLO was kicked out of Gaza the minute they took power by Hamas. So what you have today in Syria and throughout the Islamic world is this worldwide Islamist movement that rejects rich elites and poor masses, like in the Gulf, like in Saudi Arabia and Qatar. They reject secular government leaders like Sisi in Egypt, and these kings like the king of Jordan, the strongman in Assad in Syria. These are all governments that are rejected by Muslims. So that's why you have ISIS, all these other Hamas, Hezbollah, all these Islamist movements seek to return Islam to glory by returning religion to government. That's what it's all about. The lack of understanding by the Israelis, by American pressure, you got to cut a deal with the PLO, put them in charge, and everything's going to work out, completely blew up and backfired on the Israelis. All their peace policies blew up in their face. Every area of land, southern Lebanon, Gaza, everywhere they withdrew from for peace, that land was used to attack them, and they had to go retake those areas. And Israel today is retaking parts of Syria, especially in the eastern Golan, the western Golan Heights, that they gave up in the name of peace. So Israel has to re-examine their peace policies. And hopefully, I think Donald Trump's team is actually more pro-Israel than even the Israeli cabinet. So hopefully there'll be some common sense and understanding of the real aspirations of the Islamic world, and they won't pressure Israel into cutting deals and withdrawing from territory, because that's what leads to conflict and war.
It seems my greatest concern here is the potential, which we've seen before in Syria, for the mass slaughter of Christians. I think it's a very legitimate concern. Am I wrong to be concerned?
You're not. The history of Islam is that Islam has to be the dominant religion. Since the time of the Prophet Muhammad in Arabia, he dominated Christian and Jewish tribes in Arabia. Throughout 1,000 years of Islamic history, the place of Jews and Christians has to be a subservient tributary status where they adhere to the rule of Islam. So a tributary, or a dima as it's called in Arabic, uprising, such as was in Armenia and Turkey in World War I, has to be put down. Islam cannot stand for Jewish or Christian national statehood. It cannot accept it because it refutes the supremacy of Islam. So Christian and Jewish communities have always been worried, have always suffered at the hands of a Muslim majority because of their theological concept that Islam must dominate other religions. So they must be and should be very, very worried. Christian communities in Syria, of course, in Iraq, they've been decimated. And don't forget that there used to be Jewish communities in the Muslim world that are mostly all gone today because of the theology of Islam that does not accept Jewish or Christian statehood or dominance over Muslims.
All right, let's go to John Ruddick do you have a thought about the current events in Syria?
I saw a post from you earlier today, Roger, about you said it was going to reminded you of Libya. And I was very critical of what NATO did to Libya because Gaddafi was actually a lifelong enemy of the jihadis. And Libya had had a very good decade prior to that attack, and it was booming. It was very prosperous. It was tourists were going there. It was it had never been better. And then the Arab Spring comes along, and you got the jihadis are all in Benghazi. Gaddafi's going to go and take them out. Okay, which very ugly. Very brutal, okay? But the alternative was that we go and smash up Gaddafi, and then Libya becomes not just internal chaos with slave markets and poverty and people running out of food and just brutality. It became the gateway for all these illegal immigrants to jump on a little boat, hop on over to Italy and say, oh, we're European, we're in Europe now. Now, I am concerned about what's happened there because Assad is clearly a baddie. But we've got a choice. They're a baddie or a double baddie. Okay, now these guys, I hope I'm wrong, but they do appear to me to be ISIS or ISIS aligned. Okay, and yes, under Assad, the Christians were pretty well off. And we know that because they were all pro-Assad. And I find Syrian Christians to be really beautiful people, really lovely, gentle, nice people. They very much assimilate when they come and live in the West. They're good people. But they were pro-Assad. And the Christians in the Middle East, not that there's many left now, but the Christians in the Middle East are the canary in the coal mine. And so, you know, so let's hope that that the Syrian situation can turn around. But I am more pessimistic than most.
All right, I'm afraid we have to leave it there. I want to thank my friends, the documentary filmmaker Joel Gilbert, and also the Honorable John Ruddick of Australia for joining us today in the Stone Zone. Gentlemen, thank you so much. And Joel, good luck with your new documentary, The Climate According to Al Gore. It looks to me like it is indeed terrific. We'll put up a graphic where you can get where you can order it. There it is right there. The climatealgore.com. Check it out. Order your copy today. All right, folks, we are out of time.
Thank you.
I want to thank my guests. I also want to remind you that in order to see the show every day, you can go to worldviewtube.com at 4 o'clock Central, 5 o'clock Eastern to see the Stone Zone. Or if you don't have the opportunity to see it there, we can be seen on Rumble. So go to rumble.com/Roger Stone. That's rumble.com/Roger Stone. You see the little green follow button, follow us, and then set a notification for yourself so that you don't miss any of our shows. Last point, we do have one other sponsor. That is the great people at mypillow.com, our good friend Mike Lindell. If you want to support our work here at the Stone Zone, go to mypillow.com. And when you do, please use promo code STONE. There you have it, promo code STONE. Great place to do your Christmas shopping, whether it is the dog beds, the pet blankets, the extraordinarily absorbent bath and shower towels, the luxurious bed sheets, many, many great quality products at mypillow.com. And again, please use promo code STONE. Mrs. Stone will be very happy that you did. I'm Roger Stone. This has been the Stone Zone. Until tomorrow, God bless you and Godspeed.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone. Where's Roger Stone?